Sorry, I had to stop it because I was trying to figure out the streaming,
That's
but I think I've
totally
got it
okay.
now. If you want to start letting people in and just give me another minute as I'm getting it set up, I'll let you know when that's
Yeah,
done.
I think the recording stopped as well.
Yeah, I will
Okay,
restart that. I had to stop it because I
sounds
was
great.
trying to figure out the streaming, but I think I've got it now. If you want to start
And
letting people in.
I am hearing you repeating.
All right, we are good to go then.
Okay, great. Good morning to everyone who's joining us. Good afternoon. We will be getting started in just a moment once a few more folks join us. And again, good afternoon to everyone joining us. We'll be getting started in just a moment. If you can, while you're waiting, if you wouldn't mind changing your Zoom screen name to represent your organizational affiliation as well, if you can. And if you don't know how to do that in Zoom, it's in the Participants tab. You just click on the More button to the right of your name, and there's a little thing that says Rename, and you can add that there. And we will get started in just a moment. We're going to wait one more minute. Great. So let's get started. So good afternoon. My name is Stacy Hunt, and I am a contractor to the Colorado Public Utilities Commission, and I will be facilitating today's informational meeting. So today's meeting is focused on proceeding number 24R-0306E, and it is focused on the rulemaking to protect sites of historic and cultural significance to federally recognized tribes. Next slide, please. So again, thank you for joining us. Some basic housekeeping. For discussion and comments, please use the raise hand feature to get in the queue. If you're joining by phone, dial *9, and you can utilize the chat feature for questions if you'd prefer. Please include your affiliation in your Zoom name and then say your name and affiliation before speaking. Next slide, please. I want to start with a land acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge those lands that existed before and are within the state of Colorado, to include Dene, Ute, Lipan, Apache, Comanche, Arapaho, Pawnee, Kiowa, Cheyenne, Jicarilla Apache, Pueblo, and Osage, as well as those tribes that passed through for ceremony, economic, family, or other reasons. We welcome those voices in helping us understand the idea of fairness and equality. Next slide, please. So today's meeting agreements, please be present as much as you can. There's a lot of noise in our world. Practice the equity of time. If you're speaking a lot, considering asking someone else's thoughts. Treat others with respect. That's straightforward. Examine and critique systems, not people. Use the bike rack when needed. So if there are concepts or topics that are not 100% on topic, we may ask that we table those for another time, and then come ready to learn. Next slide, please. So about this meeting, this workshop is being held and led by PUC staff and consultants, not the commissioners. And the purpose of this meeting is to provide neutral education on the rulemaking, the process of rulemaking itself, and the process of collecting feedback, and then to provide options for members of the public that you have to participate in the rulemaking process more generally. The staff cannot give legal advice and are sometimes bound by law not to share opinions with the public, particularly about pending adjudications. So please avoid discussing pending ongoing adjudications at the PUC. I need to note that this meeting is not intended to gather public comment. To provide public comment, please register for the August 27th public comment hearing or use one of the methods on the website. We will provide this slide deck afterwards that will have all the contact information that we'll be breezing through in the meeting today. Next slide, please. So objectives and the agenda. So let's walk through what we plan to accomplish today. Again, today is to provide information generally about the Public Utilities Commission, what a rulemaking is and why the PUC makes rules. Some of you are very familiar with this process, some of you may not be, and so we want everybody to start with a level playing field. Our intent is to provide members of the public with information about how to submit comments during rulemakings in general, and then associated with this specific proceeding, and what you can expect during the process. And then one of our commission advisors, Kelly, is going to provide an overview of this specific rulemaking on significant sites, and that was initiated on, I believe, July 10th, which is proceeding 24R-0306E. So we're in the welcome and introductions. That's 12 o'clock. We will have the about the PUC and the rulemaking process, an overview of significant sites, and then final questions and wrap up. Next slide, please. So we don't have a ton of people in the room. I'd love to take this time for everyone to introduce themselves briefly. So if you could, please provide your name, your affiliation, and your interest in attending today. And I am going to just start at the top of the list as it's presented in the Zoom. So if I miss anybody at the end, please let me know. Becky Quintana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Becky Quintana, one of the deputy directors of the commission.
Thank you, Becky. Catherine Singh, how about you?
Hi, greetings if you can hear me. My name is Catherine
Yes.
Singh, enrolled citizen of the Ho-Chunk Nation, and I'm representing Grid Alternatives as their tribal policy director. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Craig Johnson.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Craig Johnson. I'm the Director of Policy and Strategy and General Counsel for the Colorado Rural Electric Association.
Thank you so much. Ellen Kutzer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ellen Howard Kutzer. I'm General Counsel for the Colorado Solar and Storage Association and interested in learning more about the proposed rulemaking. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Jennifer Bass.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Bass. I'm Manager of Regulatory at Black Hills, Colorado Electric, and I'm here to learn about this rulemaking and how it impacts Black Hills.
Thank you, Jennifer. Laura Bartholay.
Hi, I'm Laura Bartholet. I'm a paralegal at a law firm called Science Chestnut, who works with the Northern Cheyenne tribe.
Fantastic. Nathan Berry, please.
Hi, Nathan Berry. I'm a policy analyst with Black Hills Energy Colorado, and I work with Jen, who you just heard from.
Great. Thanks, Nathan. Parks Barroso.
Hi, Parks Barroso. I'm an attorney with Western Resource Advocates. We have an interest in tribal engagement and looking forward to learning more about the rulemaking today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Patrick Wittershine.
Hi, everyone. This is Patrick Wittershine. I'm an attorney with the Office of Utility Consumer Advocate. We appreciate you holding this and we look forward to participating in the rulemaking. Thanks.
Thank you. Sarah Keene.
Hi, sorry, trouble getting off mute. I'm Sarah Keene. I'm an attorney at the law firm Kaplan Kirsch. We represent a variety of energy project developers, local governments, as well as tribes. And so just kind of a broad interest among our client base in the rulemaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy Coleman.
Hi, yes, Stacy Coleman, the Assistant Director for Tribal Affairs for the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. I'm here today because we work closely with the tribes on siting and operational issues too, and also to learn more about this rulemaking. So thank you.
Great. And last, I believe, Terry Hendrickson.
Hi, I'm Terry Hendrickson, General Manager at Wiggins Telephone Association, doing business as Blue Lightning. Just one interested in seeing where the rulemaking is going as it would impact future construction projects for our company. Thank you.
Makes sense. Thanks, Terry. And I just realized that I didn't ask Kelly Crandall with the PUC to introduce herself. Kelly, would you like to?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Crandall. I'm one of the advisors to the commissioners, and I'll be one of the other presenters today.
Thank you all so much. So if you could advance the slide, that'd be great. you can actually go to. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about the Public Utilities Commission. So the mission of the PUC is to serve the public interest by effectively regulating utilities and facilities so that the people of Colorado receive safe, reliable, and reasonably priced services consistent with the economic, environmental, and social values of our state. Next, please. So there are 8 regulated industries under the purview of the PUC: electricity, gas, steam, water, transportation, telecommunications, rail and transit, and gas pipeline safety. Next slide, please. There are a number of ways to get involved with the Colorado PUC. Stay informed. You're all joining this meeting today, so that's a good start to the process. There are updates that are issued by the PUC. The website is a great source of information, as well as the public calendar. You're welcome to submit public comments. We'll talk a little bit more about how to do that. Multiple languages, multiple formats. You can join meetings, again, such as this one, in person or virtual for administrative cases, and then the more formal rulemaking public hearing, which you'll hear a little bit more about today. And then also to participate in formal proceedings. You can participate through legal counsel, or you can represent yourself. So either way, you don't have to have counsel. So next slide, please. So a quick overview, and you can just skip to the next slide, focused on rulemaking process and how to participate. So the purpose of the rulemaking at the PUC is to set general applicability rules. So nothing specific to individual organizations, but that are more blanket for regulated utilities. Next purpose is to hear from interested persons about the rules language and to provide due process when requirements are considered. So again, it is a feedback mechanism to understand stakeholder comments and needs, to set requirements for future cases and filings, to implement legislation where more details may be needed, and then to provide transparency on business processes by regulated utilities and the Public Utilities Commission itself. Next slide. So this graphic represents the rulemaking process, and Kelly will talk more specifically about this proceeding in the coming slides. We are at this point of notice of proposed rulemaking initiated by the PUC. The rulemaking process is formal, obviously, and it begins when this NOPR is issued to the public, and that was, I believe, on July 10th. It is intended, as I mentioned before, to establish rules for all entities in a particular industry, not just one or several. The PUC themselves may run the rulemaking, or they may delegate it to a judge. And again, Kelly will get to the specifics of this proceeding. During the rulemaking, written comments are collected, and we'll provide the information on how to submit those written comments. And at least one public hearing, in this case on August the 27th, will be held where oral comments are accepted. There may be other workshops or hearings, but it does depend on the complexity of the rules. So this informational session, for example, is one of those workshops. So within 180 days of the last hearing, there has to be a decision. There must be a decision on the rules. And then this decision is subject to other PUC procedures. So people may ask for clarifications or other changes that will also be considered by the PUC. Once the rules have been finalized, they're reviewed by the Attorney General and the Secretary of State. And that usually makes it so that the rules become effective a couple of weeks later. The entire rulemaking process, and this is important to note, may take many months or over a year from start to finish. And then after those rules are effective, they impact cases in the future that are filed by regulated entities. Next slide, please. So some key terms, we talked about the NOPR, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and that's the first decision by the PUC that starts the formal rulemaking process. That was the one issued on July 10th, and it presents proposed rules that participants are able to then comment on. A participant is all of you and many others, an individual or entity who files comments in the rulemaking. The proposed rules themselves are new rules or changes, red lines to existing rules that you can comment on, that stakeholders can comment on. The public comment hearing is a formal process, a formal hearing that's led by a hearing officer, such as a judge, and that's where individuals can share comments on the rules. Hearing may be structured into topics or may be open for people to speak when they're called on. And then advisory staff or agency staff like Kelly, who provide support to the hearing officer at the hearing officer's practice. Next slide, please. So general information about rulemakings at the PUC, verbal and written comments are given equal weight. So either participation via the mechanisms that we've talked about and we'll talk about for written comments or participation in the public hearing are both welcome. You don't need an attorney to provide comments. And so individuals are able to participate in the rulemaking, whether they're represented by an attorney or not. Per Colorado law, you can submit comments as long as the proceeding is open, but the judge may set deadlines. And so that will be dictated in the proceeding itself, and that provides more time for those comments to be fully considered. Some proceedings have workshops, which may be structured differently from public comment hearings. Some, like this workshop, are examples of that. Next slide, please. And again, I need to say all of this will be provided in writing afterwards. You don't need to scribble things down or try to get to links that you can't get to. And we will provide these. I will provide these later in the chat as well. So our preferred option is that you submit comments in the online form. But alternate options, so you can call in and leave oral comment, either English or Spanish. The number is provided here and will be provided afterwards. You can mail your comments to the address that we provide here. You can email your comments. And then if you are submitting your comments via anything other than the online format, please refer to the proceeding number so that we can make sure that things get filed in the appropriate location, or the PUC staff can. Next slide, please. So what can you expect at a public comment hearing? Again, you do not need an attorney to provide verbal comment. You can request an interpreter for another language, such as Spanish and ASL, and you do have options for languages other than these two. Obviously, these are the two that are requested most, but we do just request 7 days prior if you can, so that we can find a resource to provide interpretation in the particular language that's requested. At the virtual public comment hearing, you may be asked to raise your hand using Zoom, and you need to wait for the hearing officer to recognize you to speak. You'll be asked to provide and spell your name for the court reporter, and you will be asked to be concise, so to keep your comments within 2 to 3 minutes. You may or may not be asked follow-up questions by the hearing officer, depending on if clarification is needed. And then if you don't intend to participate in the public hearing, you can watch the hearing on YouTube as a live stream. This is being live streamed and recorded right now, and we will provide a link that is in the presentation, but we'll also provide a link to the YouTube channel. The hearings can't end before the time that's listed if there are no more participants and the hearing is complete. Next slide, which I realize I already covered, but I'm going to do it again. So our focus, the focus of the PUC, is really to accommodate all members of the public completely. And so for foreign language users and persons with disabilities, they certainly provide accommodation requests. So 7 days prior, if possible, so that we can obtain interpretation services. And those requests, the person that you need to request them of is provided here and will be provided after. And again, most common languages are Spanish and ASL, but there is the ability to accommodate others, provided that we have some advance notice. Next slide, please. So effective public comments. I think the best would be to share specific examples or details so that they're concrete and concise and referenced to specifics. Reference the rules you're talking about as well as specifically as you can. Please stay on topic to the proceeding and then be concise and courteous. And that is the general background on the PUC and the rulemaking process. Does anybody have any questions before Kelly digs into the specific proceeding? I do not see any hands raised or anybody unmuting. And so I'm going to presume that there are no questions, but you are welcome to ask them. And you're welcome to ping me via chat if there are any questions that you would like to propose. Kelly.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So Stacy's provided kind of an overview of the rulemaking process more generally at the PUC. We get a lot of questions about how this works, and I think, you know, we're open to feedback as to the kinds of topics we cover in that general rulemaking. But what I want to move into is providing a bit of an orientation for the specific rulemaking that we're talking about here, which is on protecting sites of historic and cultural significance to federally recognized tribes. Just as a little bit of background, I may or may not be able to answer questions that you all have as you go through this. This is kind of an off-the-record discussion to provide more of an orientation to the rules, to help people understand ways to participate, identify if there are areas they want to participate on, because we thought this might be the kind of proceeding where we would get a fair amount of engagement. So, take this as educational content. I'll answer questions as I can. I may phone a friend from one of my colleagues who's on the call if I need to. In commission proceedings, rulemakings are docketed into proceedings. This one, the number is 24R-0306E. We're kind of short forming it as the significant sites rulemaking. But if you are looking for full documents, that is the link. That's where you'll find all of the records associated with the proceeding. When the commission opened this rulemaking, they can make the decision to hear it as all three of them, or to refer it to a single commissioner to hear, or to refer it to an administrative law judge. This proceeding has been referred to Judge Alenka Hahn. She is going to be running the proceeding as an administrative law judge, and she will be taking comments, running hearings, and issuing the recommended decision on the rules over the coming months. As Stacy had mentioned, comments can be provided anytime the case is open, and we'll talk a bit more about that, but just to flag some upcoming dates. The first public comment hearing on this, we don't know if there will be more than one or just the one, but the public comment hearing that's coming up is on August 27th. And so the judge has requested comments in advance of that public comment hearing to help prepare for that. So initial written comments by August 9th and responsive comments by August 16th. And I'll now turn to talking just a little bit more about some of the origin and purpose of this proceeding. So this proceeding came out of concerns that utility infrastructure such as transmission or development of renewable energy resources like wind turbines could impact the viewshed of the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site. And so the commission in a prior proceeding received comments from the tribal administrator of the Northern Cheyenne Tribe of Montana, asking, among other things, for the commission to create rules that would protect sites of historic and cultural significance. And so since that time, staff of the commission, including leadership, have met with representatives of the Northern Cheyenne Tribe, folks from History Colorado. So that is, we'll talk about certain offices of History Colorado, but the State Historic Preservation Office and the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, as well as the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs. And so have worked in discussion with those stakeholders to talk about potential issues and options for the rules here. Where we are in the rulemaking process, as Stacy noted, this is a process that can take many months sometimes. It depends on the volume of comments and the complexity of the issues and the deadlines attached to the case. But right now we are at the very start of this rulemaking. The commission issued its first decision, which was the notice of proposed rulemaking, which started this process. We are now in the portion of seeking written comments from stakeholders and hosting the first public comment hearing. And so depending on that, there may or may not be additional processes moving into a decision proposing changes to rules. I want to talk briefly about some of the things that we have learned about state agency and federally recognized tribe interactions in Colorado. I am not going to represent that I am an expert on this issue. So this is the kind of thing that I think is comments are welcome on, specific information that would be useful to understand in this process. But there are three concepts I wanted to briefly talk about. One is the state has a Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs, which acts as the official liaison between the state and the Southern Ute Indian Tribe and the Ute Mountain Ute Indian Tribe They also have other roles in working with federally recognized tribes and urban indigenous populations. There are also individual tribal liaisons at some state agencies, I believe all state agencies, who coordinate with the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs and consult with federally recognized tribes as appropriate. I know we have folks who have that role on the call, and so welcome. And just for reference, in Colorado, the PUC itself does not have a tribal liaison, but the Department of Regulatory Agencies, of which we are a division, does have a tribal liaison. And then the last entity to briefly mention is the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, which is part of, so OAHP is what I'll use, but it's part of the State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, at History Colorado. And so they're involved in state archaeological and architectural, historic preservation. They're also brought in when there are situations identifying potential burial sites or human remains. And so these are just some of the entities and structures that the commission introduced in its initial decision. I'll next talk about the two primary types of application proceedings that the rules proposed modifications to. The first one is an application for an electric resource plan by a utility. These are multi-phase proceedings. A utility will submit an application to the commission saying, you know, how much energy resources does it need? What is its plan to acquire those resources? What kinds of contracts will it use? And after a litigated process with review and testimony by other parties, the commission will issue a decision that accepts or rejects or modifies the utility's plan for doing that work. At which point the utility is actually moving into a second phase, which is generally a competitive solicitation process. So it's seeking bids from fossil fuel generating units, from independent power producers, from other entities on how they will provide power to the utility. And it will evaluate those bids and present a portfolio of resources to the commission, again, to think about approval and whether it's prudent to move forward with that proposal. And so that's called phase 2. It's usually much shorter than a phase 1 process because the bids are in and there is a speed attached with making decisions and beginning to move forward. And then after that process, there's an ongoing process of reporting on what bids have been selected, how contracting is going, how construction is going, and so forth. And so this process generally happens about every 4 years under our rules. There can sometimes be variations to that. So that's the kind of process that is undertaken by electric utilities at the state, Xcel Energy, Black Hills, Colorado, Tri-State, and so forth. The other application that is relevant to these rules is the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. So this is when the utility submits an application specifically talking about some facilities it's planning to build. So for example, a unique and large transmission investment or a particular new substation. And so the utility will provide estimated costs, timelines, and other information. And again, like in an ERP, this process involves testimony and a hearing. And so there is a decision by the commission that would either make changes, for example, or authorize the utility to move forward with construction. At which point the utility is going to move forward with generation, transmission, and distribution projects. And then it will bring costs into recovery and other proceedings, such as rate cases. And it may be reporting on ongoing progress in a variety of venues. So those are some of the general, both of these are multi-month processes. In particular, the electric resource plan can be they can be very large cases involving many parties, and they have multiple phases to them. Moving into what was specifically introduced in the commission's decision, some of the proposed changes have to do with adding certain definitions. So some of these definitions are short forms to make it easier to refer to them throughout, to have a consistent point of reference throughout the decisions. So two of the initial definitions that were added were tribal nations, which means federally recognized tribes. And the other is historic and cultural resources, which would be cultural resources, human remains and associated funerary objects, viewsheds, and sacred objects. These definitions are created with recognition of the complex state and federal and local regulations involved here. And so these are the kind of things the commission has specifically invited comment on how clear and accurate these definitions are. There is one other definition to introduce, which is a very important one for purposes of this rulemaking, which is the term significant sites. And the rules provide 3 different examples of what a significant site could be. Ellen, do you want to go, or do you want to, is it after significant sites?
It's after significant sites. Sorry,
Okay.
Kelly, I'm interrupting.
No, that's good. We appreciate the participation, so thank you. So the 3 significant site examples would be first, specifically referring to the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site. This was an ask to the commission to prioritize it. And this makes it very clear in the NOPR. The second possible path that a significant site could be identified is if it is registered within the Cultural Resources Database maintained by the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation within History Colorado. Our understanding is that this is a database which provides historic and cultural sites that have been identified and evaluated in some way. And so this may be a tool that could be used to help scope the kinds of sites that are included here. The other third path is a site designated by the commission as a significant site within a particular proceeding. And so the idea that the commission may add to the list of significant sites, I will talk a bit later about the mechanisms through which that may be done. And these are, again, areas that the commission is specifically asking for comments on in terms of do these pathways make sense? How can they be made clear? Things like that. And Ellen, I'll go ahead and pause if you wanted to ask something.
Yeah, Kelly, thank you. And thank you for all the hard work that's gone into the NOPR document. So I did have a question about the cultural resources database and understanding if that database is available to parties and or developers now. I do know that rightfully so, significant sites are highly protected by History Colorado and the SHPO, as they should be, to prevent denigration of those sites. I am concerned that if those sites are not available to developers in advance, we may not know, what is and isn't covered. And so I tried to do a little research on this on my own, and I was unsuccessful. So I was wondering if this would be an opportunity to get more information about what that database is, and the availability of those sites. So hopefully utilities and developers can plan around those important resources in advance. Thanks.
Yeah, and I am not personally an expert on the cultural resources database. My understanding is there are some restrictions on its use. However, I think the commission did specifically ask for information about, have people use this tool? Is this a tool that would make sense to use in the context of this? Would it make sense to have more of a discussion with that office in the course of this proceeding and things like that?
And Kelly, I can chime in very briefly because I did just work on a project that involved History Colorado. You're correct that there is limited access to the resources, but there is the ability to request file access. And I can provide, again, this is public knowledge, but I can provide the link to the site that talks about the access to the cultural resource files and the process. Although again, not coming from the Public Utilities Commission, just coming from public domain. So that's in the chat.
Great, thanks, Stacey. And maybe just to close out, I have consulted with some consultants in our membership to understand if this is a database that they're currently using as they're advising project developers about potential resources on properties that may be proposed for development. So COSA will try to run that down and include that information to the extent available in our comments, if that's helpful to the commission. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we look forward to seeing what kinds of issues emerge as comments are coming in here. And just, you know, I think you've heard me before, but this isn't on the record. But we do appreciate comments.
Absolutely, definitely understand that, Kelly, and we'll make sure to put our position on the record. So thank you.
So moving into a couple of elements, just again, we've talked about terminology, we talked about the kinds of cases that are impacted. This is again, kind of trying to orient everyone to the rules that the commission proposed at a high level. So there are 3 categories of cases where there are different requirements. We talked about electric resource plans a little bit ago. Under an electric resource plan, a utility would have an obligation to work with tribal nations and the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation to identify actual and potential impacts to significant sites, to identify what those impacts are and collect information about potential impacts from bidders, and to present information about impacts to sites and opportunities to mitigate or avoid those kinds of impacts to the commission. Moving into, you know, the electric resource plan is sometimes an earlier stage to a CPCN. In a CPCN context, a utility would provide information about impacts to significant sites and opportunities to mitigate and avoid the PUC. I think the difference is those things may be better known at times in a CPCN process than they might be in an electric resource planning process. And then in transmission planning, the commission made some modifications to the longer term transmission planning rules to have utilities, when they're doing reporting, provide information on their interactions with tribal nations as part of the long-term transmission planning process. Through the context of pre-rulemaking, I believe stakeholders indicated that earlier information is generally better. And so that is something that was factored into the rules. In each of these kinds of proceedings, and particularly in electric resource plans and in certificates of public convenience and necessity, there is certain information that the commission has proposed that electric utilities provide once they know about potential impacts, which would be, you know, what is the action at issue and what are the actual or potential impacts? Are there negative impacts that could be avoided or mitigated? And are there alternatives that could be considered if negative impacts can't be avoided or mitigated? Which tribal nations are affected by the proposed actions? What communications have been had, either between the utility or a third party, such as an independent power producer and the tribal nation? And the process for ongoing consultation and communications, as well as a description of the federal, state, and local requirements that are relevant to the proposed action. So there are varying requirements for cultural resource surveys, repatriation of burial site artifacts and so forth. And those can vary at the federal, state, and local level depending on the land ownership and things like that. In the course of this, the commission also proposed rules that provide certain rights for tribal nations. The first is regarding coordination, which is a rule that utilities work with tribal nations and the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation to identify impacts to significant sites and to consult with tribal nations basically as soon as reasonably practical when there are impacts identified. The second right would be around notice. So a utility filing an application that addresses impacts to significant sites should also provide notice of that filing to affected tribal nations and to the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. Our understanding is that in many cases, the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation is involved in these kinds of conversations. This situation also gets at a situation like in an electric resource plan where an impact to a site may not be known in phase 1, but it may be known in phase 2. And so then there is notice at that phase to the right entities. And then the commission also proposed in the rules that there be an intervention by right for tribal nations. And so there are multiple types of intervention. Intervention by right generally means you can participate in a proceeding without seeking the commission's permission and providing information as to why. And so this is a limited right. The trial staff of the commission have it, the Colorado Energy Office and the Utility Consumer Advocate. The commission has proposed that this also be available to representatives of tribal nations who become involved during the intervention period or within a short time after the actual impacts to a significant site are known. And their representative does not have to be an attorney. And then the final point there is that that is proposed as a place that a tribal nation could identify other significant sites for consideration by the commission besides the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site. As I had noted before, this is a particular topic the commission's decision calls out to seek questions on those mechanisms. Yeah, Ellen.
Sorry, me again. I'm just curious, having practiced at the PUC for some time, the thinking behind establishing intervention by right in Rule 3620 instead of modifying the intervention procedural rule. Maybe that's not a good idea, but for those of us who have to come into proceedings in other means, that's the rule that we look to. And I'm just curious more than anything as to the commission's thinking on modifying the electric rules specifically.
And I don't believe I'm able to provide any background on sort of the thinking on it, but
that's fine.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. We're kind of coming up on the end of some of our content, and we'll have some more time for questions here. Just flagging again for people that the next public comment hearing will be held on Tuesday, August 27th, beginning at 11 a.m. It's listed to no later than 5 p.m., but as Stacy has noted, hearings can end earlier if there's nobody waiting on the call to speak. If you think you're not able to comment until a different time that day, please let me know. That's not a guarantee that can be accommodated, but just let me know.
Great. And also just to note again that this is an informational session and that the public hearing itself, as well as the written comment period, is intended to collect any comment or feedback. So it sounds like a couple of things, Ellen, that you raised today could be appropriate for that. So yes, again, any questions or comments to the background that has been provided today? Okay, I will give it a few more beats here in case somebody is having difficulty unmuting themselves. That happens, to see if there are any other questions or comments. Sarah, I see your video on and you're unmuted. Did you have a question?
Wonder if you can provide any additional thoughts or background on sort of how, if at all, you sort of anticipate the commission using the information. You know, the rules sort of speak to what needs to be presented in an ERP proceeding or in a CPCN application. But they're less clear to me on sort of how the commission actually uses that information in making decisions. Generally speaking, the commission doesn't have citing authority over specific projects that is, you know, statutorily directed to local governments. And so I'm just curious on sort of kind of the statutory boundaries here on how the commission can use that information without overstepping local governments. And relatedly, just timing wise, it's tricky, right? Because projects, especially in ERPs, haven't gone through permitting yet at the time that they're selected in phase 2. And so what happens if you know, the utility proposes a certain amount of mitigation here, but then in their 1041 or other permitting process, a different set of mitigation arises? Like, does that information have to come back to the commission? Like, it seems like there maybe is kind of a timing and authority disconnect. And maybe that's beyond the scope here, but I just don't know if there's any background here that the staff can share.
I would say, you know, the kinds of background I can share in a meeting like this are the kinds of things the commission's included in its decision. And so I think the commission has acknowledged the 1041 process and the complexities and the role of local siting. I believe the rules include statements that the commission would address how they've treated this information and how they've specifically considered any comments made by tribal nations in the course of making a decision in the phase 1 and 2 process. But they did specifically ask for kind of questions on mechanics and the role, you know, how this interacts with other processes and things like that. So you know, I'm afraid with this kind of process, I can't provide a lot of like specifics, but these are all things the commission is inviting comments on.
And so, Kelly, it sounds to me like the input that Sarah has and your experience and perspective would lend to providing these questions and noting the complexity of the process in the public comment, the public hearing, or the written comment period. Is that correct? Sounds like important stuff, Sarah, and we encourage you to participate. Great. Are there other folks that would like to ask some questions? Feel free to unmute yourself, turn your camera on or not, raise your hand, whatever works. Throw it in the chat, I'll verbalize it. All right, I'm going to give it a couple more beats in case, again, you're having difficulty unmuting or haven't thought of your comment yet. Great. Kelly, did you have any parting comments?
I want to really thank everyone for participating. And the comment I wanted to make is we've only done a couple of meetings like this where we provide a bit more of an orientation to rulemaking and do kind of a more educational upfront process. We'd like to send a survey out and hear if there's a different way to do this or if there are other suggestions for how we could improve this process for folks participating. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to receiving robust comments as we move forward here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelly. And all of the information that we've provided today will be provided in a follow-up. And yes, Alexa, the recording will be available, and we will send out the slides that have information about how to participate in the upcoming public hearing that is on August 27th. And there is a link in the material to register for that, as well as information about how to provide written comment. So we appreciate everyone's participation. And I would like to second Kelly's suggestion that if there is anything that the PUC can do to help provide background information, context in order to enable the best possible public participation, we take that seriously. So feel free to send comments along to Kelly or myself as well, just related to the process. Fantastic. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your Thursday.